I know, it's typical, isn't it?
Well, okay, welcome to Basis 125. It's a tremendous honor to have you on, Steve. And you're Phenomenal Magazine, and you do this fantastic conference, and you've managed to get another one done this year. Do you want to talk about that briefly? We're recording this in May 2022.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's been a few years, and we've had a few knockbacks because of the whole situation in the country regarding COVID and that. And of course, we had to complete on the cusp of when we just 2 weeks before lockdown, we ended up having to cancel the last event, and of course it financially hit us quite badly because at that time the government hadn't told the companies and things to start to be fair and give money back. It was only when the second lockdown came, the UK government started saying to businesses, look, be fair, give some money back, da, 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 da. So we lost a lot of money on that cancellation, but we always wanted to make sure we would be coming back. And of course, we had to test and just see how things were going. Eventually, we managed to sort one out for June of this year in Blackpool, and it's a little bit of a smaller event than we normally would have in Manchester because it's a very specialised theme one around the subject of ancient mysteries. So we've got a number of different guests coming from all over the world: Eric von Daniken, Giorgio Tsoukalis, and they're going to be providing some of the more up-to-date information regarding some of the strange anomalies that they found and where do we move from here. But it does also skirt the aspects of ufology, and we've got Richard Doty over now. Richard Doty,
that's a big deal, that.
Well, it's very debatable. You either love him or you hate him. There are people out there said, I don't trust him, da da da. He used to be a disinformation officer for the US government.
But then, sorry, listen, Steve, I've got to stop you right there. I mean, I don't know where this controversy comes from. We don't have this in this subject. We love each other. We're all above board, and we're certainly got no secret agents from various people, even the CIA involved, or maybe even the what's the Russian one these days?
KGB. Yeah.
Oh no, that's so last century. Is it the FSB or something?
Yeah, it's something like that now. Yeah, of course. I mean, you know what?
I mean, everybody in ufology really loves each other.
Oh, I'm sure they do. And it's
I'm not going to talk alien autopsy about or anything like that.
Well, you know what? Ufology's always been a minefield, but you know what? You've got to. I think people have the right to come in and say, look, Richard Doty's he's retired now. He wants to talk about some of the things. Some of them are very, very interesting. Some of the instances, I don't know how true they are because at the end of the day, if we're talking about government stuff, he's not really be coming forward much with evidence-wise on some of those cases. But he does have a part to play regarding disinformation, which he holds his hands up. It was his job, and that's what he was doing. And I find that interesting because we don't often hear someone coming forward and saying, you know what, I was the ones that were giving disinformation out, purposely leading people in the wrong direction. And good on him. If that's true, then fair enough. It shows some honesty. But it's interesting. So we've got Richard Doty over, and I think people are going to be fascinated with his lecture. That's
going into the bedrock of the UFO subject.
Oh, it really is. It really is. So it's a 3-day event, 24th, 25th, and 26th of June, held at the new conference centre in Winter Gardens Conference Centre. It's a brand new conference room, 2 floors, and we're going to be there for the 3 days. And it should be interesting. We're looking forward to it. And then, of course, next year, back to Manchester normally, if everything's well. We'll continue on Manchester for August of next year, which is at the Bowlers Exhibition Centre in Trafford Park, Manchester.
Yeah, I know that place well. I've done a few broadcasts on kickboxing and cage fighting there. It's a great event. Although I have to say, we did not have the intervention of Luke Skywalker, which I think you do.
Yeah, well, we do. Because the good thing is that when we have the big events, we have a number of props. We have big flying saucers and.
Where do all those come from? I mean, they're not exactly something you store in your back garden or your garage.
No, we have storage facilities for these things, but they're manufactured, they're purposely built for us. Because when we wanted to bring an event together, my main concern is where this subject's going to be in 20, 30 years' time. Because I want younger people to be coming forward and doing the jobs that we're doing.
That is so true. So true.
I was surprised once we started introducing it a bit more Comic-Con style. people will come in with the young uns, 10, 12, 14-year-olds, and they're getting introduced to the subjects and asking questions. And that's what I love, because I've got to consider where we're going. This fight's going to go on for some time. It's, nobody wants to give us any information, really, to be honest with you. And I think, it'll supersede me and it'll end up going into the next generation. And I can see that actually happening. So luckily, I'm hoping people will come forward, want to pick up that burning candle and carry the fight on.
That is absolutely so true. But we have had this thing in Washington in the last couple of weeks or 10 days.
We have.
Now, there are people who've done analysis of it. I think I haven't seen Stephen Greer's analysis. I've yet to see. I'll be talking to Steve Bassett later today on that. And I mean, he's been a pioneer of pushing this in the political domain in Washington, right in the heart, well, I don't want to say in the thick of it, because that has other connotations. But, I mean, what do you feel about that? I mean, what's your feeling about the CIA sort of essentially, I mean, they're drawing a year zero, that basically nothing has happened before now, and now it's got to be UAP, although we've used UAP before.
Well, it's preposterous. It really is. I mean, to be honest, when this all first kicked off and all the stuff started coming out from the Pentagon, the Tic Tac UFO, of course, they had a big convention. A lot of the scientist guys were there, and it was produced by the TTSA. And on screen, I was horrified to see the photograph, which was one of my photographs from an investigation I conducted in Manchester, well, they were very clever. They didn't say this is a photograph of the Tic Tac. But when talking about the Tic Tac, they put this huge, I mean, I've never seen a screen so big, huge image of this photograph, which is one of 6 photographs I have. And
you didn't share that on Google Prime?
No, very cleverly they didn't say it was the Tic Tac photograph, but it led everybody there to believe it was.
Are you saying that maybe somebody would suggest something by not actually saying it, but inferring it in an implied kind of a way?
It's a psychological process of dealing with that. I mean, putting an image up, you don't have to say it is. And you've always got that thing to fall down onto. Oh, I never said it was, but you have to question, well, what the hell is it doing up there? I only posted that in one place, and that was on the Jeff Rent's UFO sightings website back in 2005. Someone had took that photograph, altered it slightly by light blasting it, don't ask me why, and put it up there. And somehow TTSA got it, and they were putting it up in this big conference. And I thought, what the hell? That was the problem right from day one, because I thought, well, do you know what? How can you start to take these guys seriously about any form of research when they're not even checking what photographs is being utilised here? It turned out to be nothing more than a Mylar balloon, number one, Mylar balloon, taken on a sunny day. But, and it took me 3 months of telling them, and they ignored me. Eventually I went to the press. And then the press got in touch with them, and then he came out with a kind of a one-line apology. Oh, we're very sorry, there was a mistake, da-da-da-da-da, and they understood, and that kind of disappeared. To me, it didn't, because I don't know how that can happen. Not even my guys would be daft enough to do something like that. So I was very suspicious right from the start, Miles, on this information that was being released. I looked at the video content of the pilots. Now, luckily for me, I mean, I have an uncle who was a Top Gun trainer, just luckily for me. So I can talk with him about camera footage and, FLIR gun camera footage. And
there's no coincidence with the release of the movie on that? Do you think?
Yeah, maybe a little bit. I don't know.
That's a big coincidence there.
I was clearly told, well, where's the footage? Well, we got infrared footage, and they said, well, it's not showing anything. It's showing just infrared signatures. There is about 22 different pieces of video filmed, real film footage of these UAPs, if that's what they want to call them, and yet they didn't put them out. They just put the infrared FLIR footage out. I wasn't overly impressed with it, but and then of course you started talking about all different things about the capabilities of the Tic Tac and this, that, and the other. And I'm not 100%. I'll be honest with you. I'm not 100%. It's the phenomena. I am not, because, what people are really unaware of is the incredible technologies that we currently have. And what I did...
No, this is the whole thing about the fake alien invasion thing. They've got enough fancy toys to fake an alien invasion. And that's what Eric von Daniken... not Eric von Daniken, von Braun was referring to.
Easily done. You know, we've even got holographic imaging now. Now, the thing for me is that something didn't sit right, because everything was about generating a threat. Everything was about, well, it's a threat, it's a threat, it's a threat. I mean, what do threats normally lead to? Masses and masses of amounts of money into the defense program. I do know that the US have been trying the best to officially, I'll say officially, want to weaponize space, though that they've probably been doing it unofficially for countless.
I mean, Carol Rosen has been really fighting on that for years.
Yeah, well, that's
the former assistant or companion to von Braun.
Well, they have to break the Space Treaty Act, of course, and that's the biggest problem.
And I mean, and Elon Musk's sort of thrown his Starlink program into the whole mix of basically now deciding which country should be. Well, don't want to go too much further than that.
Well, I looked into an Israeli document back from 2000 and I think it was about 2012. And when you look at UFO documentation from the Israel, the military air forces, they don't shy away from the word, we encountered a UFO. I mean, they're quite plentiful. But there is documentation there that they said they witnessed pill-shaped CIA drones. And they also went on to say it was impossible. It was a waste of time scrambling jets, because these things would just outmaneuver us all the time. It was a waste of time of engagement. That was back then. And I'm thinking to myself, why did they say CIA drones and not UFOs? That's what really got me interested. I thought, well, and the more I dug around and started talking to the people up the hierarchies, they were saying drone wars between different countries have been going on for quite a length of time. This is the new method of being able to maneuver vehicles so fast around that they have to be pilotless, of course. But then there's the general public are saying, well, you know what, we're not really exceeding 5,000 miles per hour. We haven't got anything that can do that, because this was the biggest factor about the tic-tac. Oh, well, it dropped from 80,000 feet to almost 0 feet in so many seconds, which takes multiple thousands of miles per hour. But then all I have to do is go back and look at the official documentation, the Air Force documentation from 1962 and 63, from David Adair's rocket tests. And his rockets were traveling at 8,465 miles an hour per peak. That's 8,500 miles per hour.
And is that in dense atmosphere?
That's taken from basically the rocket launches off the ground, and it meets its dry bed location within seconds. Now, this was a magnetic containment fusion engine. This was 1962, 63, traveling at speeds of 8,500 miles an hour. It went up so fast that it caused a vacuum between the Earth and space, and it was a double explosion because of the collapse. I mean, and when we're talking about this sort of technology back in early 60s, and people still saying we haven't got anything that could travel roughly 5,000 miles per hour. Well, David Adair completely went past that at 8,000.
That type of engine is a completely new name. I mean, I've heard of Mercury engines based on what the Germans were doing in the war, some kind of scalar, electric field engine of some kind.
The magnetic containment fusion engine is like the power of the sun, and it's contained within a special vacuum. And what that does is it applies so much power instantaneously that you don't even see the launch. In fact, the generals watching the launch thought it exploded. It took off, so they couldn't see it. They didn't even see it. And of course, it was only when the phone rings that's to say it meets its destination. And they realized very quickly that they've got some very, very clever exotic engines that can travel at incredible speeds. Now, that's 1962, 63. What we got now, biggest thing for me when I saw the Tic Tac was there was 4 little prongs on the bottom of it. Those prongs to me look like pitot tubes, which you find on remotely piloted vehicles. And
in other words, it picks up the velocity of air going in, air pressure, whatever it is. And
they also help connect with GPS tracking and stuff like that. That data, is instant. And to me, I would not put money on it to say that these things are extraterrestrial or belongs to the phenomena, when I'm looking more at a very high level technology. Because when I looked at the dates, here's the biggest thing. When I looked at the dates when these engagements happen, The Roosevelt and the Nimitz have just been fitted with this new type of radar system. The following day, the pilots are suddenly pitted against these things. Now, the pilots don't know. They won't need to know.
Well, they don't want them to know because it would ruin the test.
Exactly. Now, you only got to go back to the early 70s when starfighter pilots were being pitted against the stealth fighter, because that was flying around in 1973, 74. We didn't see it until our television screens till 1991. But starfighter pilots were reporting, what the hell is this that I'm up against? It's a foreign object. I don't know what it is. It's outmaneuvering me, da 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 da. This is what they kind of do.
And the Starfighter was the American version of the Lightning. It was one hell of
an aircraft. It was about the best they had at the time. But I mean, you want to compete that against a stealth fighter, and this is what they were doing back then. It's the same scenario as seems in current times. And there's no better place to do it. Out at sea, it's more than 22 miles from the horizon, so you don't see anything. It's a no-fly zone for any normal commercial aircraft. It's a no fishing zone, no boat zone, because it's a militarized zone. It's like your new Area 51 in a sense of thinking. Better than Area 51, actually, because you don't get to see what's going on out there. And when you look at the times and the dates, there's always been some type of new equipment. It's been installed. I mean, you have to take in consideration, it was only about an hour later that some guys turned up on a helicopter to remove all the footage. I mean, they got there fast. How did they know about it? Well,
I think that's one of the big giveaways of the Rendlesham Forest thing, how a transport aircraft happened to just be able to land and take whatever they had away.
Exactly. So, I wouldn't want to put money on it that this is likely more our phenomenon. When I see the real phenomenon, I see morphing, duplicating, disappearing, reappearing, all these other strange physiological aspects to the real phenomena. This looks to be a very kind of nuts and bolts craft, and outmaneuvering pilots as if they're being tested against them. And yet, there's so much more footage that could come along, and they haven't released it. Everything since they've released it has all been about threat. And I'm sure it's going to pile in a huge amount of defense money. We haven't got anything to threat really about. I mean, this phenomenon has been with us age old. We don't often have collisions in the sky. I mean, I think these things are clever enough to know that. But to wrap all this in a nutshell of UAP, I mean, I know UAP, it's associated with meteorological stuff a lot, but to do it in this new package and present it so is kind of a reboot process. It's like, do not look. I mean, how can they come forward and say we haven't got and we need more information? You've got 70 years of information you sat on. You don't need any more.
I think this is a question of believing your own PowerPoint.
It is. But I think
if you do that, it's fatal. And then anybody who has a different view, they're going to arrest. And you can't say that. That's misinformation.
Well, I think it's a very clever way of just putting aside the last 70 years of all the suspicions, all the remarks, all the lies, and try and give this phenomenon a reboot under the heading of UAP and stepping forward from here, because now we've got the UAP, we've got the Space Force with all those sort of things all coming in, and it just leads me to believe that it's our technology, it's pressing forward for defensive, weaponizing of space, da-da-da-da-da. I'm seeing it slowly unfold, but I'm still not convinced. Out of all the people I've talked to, out of all the things I've seen, I'm really not convinced that's the true phenomenon we're dealing with at this moment.
Well, they've tried this with on Discovery, ATIP or whatever it is, and does that even exist? Is that all a big hoax anyway?
Well, it's a bit little
whatever.
Seems a little misleading.
I mean, it's a rerun. There's a $50 million budget behind this.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's
and it didn't get into ratings.
No, I mean, there are the other main programs which really would have headed this. I mean, really, ATIP was more of a personal venture into the study of UAP rather than an official one. And that's why the Pentagon is saying, well, it didn't really exist, or Alexander wasn't really associated, da-da-da-da-da. I mean, though that he was working in that field, it might not have been all under an official capacity. A lot of it might not.
I mean, is this a sort of a dipping the toe in the water, and now they're dipping the heel in the water?
It does seem a little bit like that. I mean, the problem is that you don't know what we're being told. If there's information, disinformation coming out, it's a mixture, it's a pot of stuff. One thing I can say for sure, though, I mean, when I was watching this most recent hearing, I was really surprised that these people, this UFO task force, the people that are involved, are just pretty much clueless, or or they've just not been given any information pertaining to past incidents, significant incidents where military weapons have been disarmed, over military bases by the
Yeah,
infrastructure.
the entire nuclear stockpile at Rendlesham Forest, Bent Borders, and so forth, and other places. But I mean, what does that tell you? Who's actually pulling the strings on this? Because are they saying that because I say it, it must be true, and nobody's allowed to disobey me, or whatever?
It's really difficult because of the timing now. The timing now is when we have incidents like this, we don't know if it's another country's technology is capable of doing these sort of things, or if they're flying things around which look, like the phenomena like a UFO. At this stage now, if we went back 60 years ago, 50 years ago, a whole different ball game, because we wouldn't have had maybe this stuff. But now it's so difficult to identify what is what. I'd always go with that the phenomenon seemingly has a much more connection, a conscious connection with the observers, and especially through engagements with military pilots, they seem to know what.
Well, the thing about it is the ability of the television industry. This has even been discussed in broadcast magazines. That the technology to animate, you could literally have Adolf Hitler in the House of Commons, in color, ultra high resolution, talking with Abraham Lincoln, and delivering a speech on a living event. I mean, I'm picking up. I'm using completely silly thing, but you have the technology to make that happen, and nobody will know the difference. You can even project it in the room, and the people in the room would not necessarily know it was anything different.
No, the technology, what we're seeing come to the forefront now to the public realm. I mean, we worked last year on something which is referred to as deepfake technology, just as tests, and you cannot and will not know the difference. Your eyes will lie to you. I mean, anybody, you can turn anybody into anyone, and you would not know with that technology. Now, that's in the public domain. How long does it took to become into the public domain?
Exactly.
No, it could be 10, 20 years.
I mean, people have been talking about this Project Bluebeam for years, I don't know, 3 or 4 decades or whatever. Yeah. Obviously, it's something else.
Oh, it is. I mean, they've got holographic technology now, and you would not know. You wouldn't know it's a non-physical thing until you would actually put your hand through the darn thing. They're incredible. And
in fact, I'm not entirely sure. Even I think it can feel.
I think it's
got a reaction time that if you do put your hand on, it will then move back or something like that.
Yeah, I've read these rumors, these things suggesting that technology does exist. But how far away is that technology before it reaches public domain?
The fact we're talking about it means it's probably out of date by 20 years or whatever.
Exactly. So we can't trust what we read. We can't trust what we see. Where are we getting our input of information from? Are they reliable sources? Even our own eyes aren't reliable sources anymore when it comes to this type of technology.
But based on what you've just said about the recent presentation, the people who are making the presentations don't seem to know what the hell's going on either. So it's not even a case of the tail wagging the dog.
I can't see it getting anywhere. I mean, I know that this is probably going to encourage more further hearings to take place. I think I would have preferred a more scientific inquiry than a hearing, because I think that deserves now, with the information we've got, a scientific inquiry. Not another hearing to establish, is there a phenomenon? I mean, I think we've pretty much established that over the last 70 years, but they want to stick that away and reboot it and try and prove it again. Well, the problem is now we've got the modern technology now, which can be misidentified as stuff. But I'm sure that it's going to lead to defense money, defense program, and that's going to be given out quite freely into the black budget programs, and all sorts of things will probably come of this. Because the biggest concern is that they're trying to make out, could it be other people from other countries? Well, it could be. I think probably the US are testing their own pilots. I think other countries have got drone technology. Absolutely, they've got drone technology.
It's a swarm drone technology.
Swarm drone technology. Yeah.
I mean, I gather we have drones as big as a Mini, and they can fly 120 of them, and they all know what they're doing and fly around in formation.
They do. Yeah, I've seen one of those shows where they'll make pictures in the sky. It's incredible what they can do. And people don't really readily know what they're seeing in the sky. That's the problem now. And differentiating between advanced technology and something unusual is becoming extremely, extremely difficult. But I think there's a reason behind all this effort about the UAP effort, the reboot, and all that. It's all to head us in a slightly different direction. And of course, it'll be for them. It will not be for us. It's not, it's not for us to be advantageous about this. It'll be something advantageous to them.
Well, yes.
They're doing it.
But we have a danger talking about. I don't like really talking about politics, but the United States and the UK and the Western powers have lost their edge. Nobody trusts them anymore.
No.
Each country is now going to have to develop their own technology to defend themselves because they've dropped the ball on this big time.
They do. I mean, I think they're all countries. I think the Russia and the Chinese. I mean, I look at some of their stuff and their paintings from 20 years ago. They're just as, if not as more clever in some cases regarding their technologies applied to drones. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, who's to know? We can have drones that can travel at tremendous speed. And the problem is that we are getting to a point where drone technology is outdoing aircraft technology because it's manless. It doesn't have to have the restraints of speed and maneuver. All we've got to do is be able to contain that source, contain that energy in an environment around it. And there are numerous different theories on different methods over the years. It started with Tesla and it goes on to Brown and all sorts of different things. But there are many, many different ways of asserting that a field of energy around these devices, these objects, which would make them almost invisible to the physiological surroundings that we currently have around aircraft. The force of air, the true phenomena. I mean, because when ATIP came out, the biggest thing they said is, it's this transmedium travel. They can travel underwater, they can travel in the sky, they can travel in space. And I thought, well, that's very good. But where's the fourth one? Because I know that the true phenomena can travel into mountains. And can go
I've seen that. I mean, there's video. A friend of mine a long time ago in Red Rock had stuff flying straight into the canyon, straight into the mountain. And we have talk of UFOs flying straight into the ground at nuclear power stations in the Lake District, and we have talk of huge manta craft flying into Farnborough, that airfield.
That's right. I think that's the true phenomena because it represents a metaphysical part of itself. It always has done, And when they have those, they completely missed that fourth medium, that quad medium travel instead of transmedium travel. They completely left off the list. So I questioned them about it at the higher levels. And they said to me, they knew it exists, but they couldn't put it out because the amount of information that they put out from the Pentagon is started to get interest by scientists. And they wanted the scientists to get more involved in the study of UAP, but they didn't want to provide the quad medium because it was too woo-woo and might scare them away. It's something that they might have to digest over a period of time the more they study into this.
Well, I think the last thing I saw out of NASA or something about they had the Elon Musk big new spaceship, but it was surrounded with two circular devices to sort of. Have they already like this warp drive to Mars or what?
Well, when they started saying that they created NASA, was on the. They created the kind of a warp drive. I believe they've already probably done so. By the time it gets to the press and documentation and announcements and stuff, it usually works like that in these programs. That they probably already got it. I mean, science fiction is becoming science fact. It always has done. Because I talked to professors years ago and they said, look, if you can imagine it, we can do it. It's as simple as that. It's just a matter of time.
That's the key, imagination.
It's exactly that. It's his imagination. And now we're starting to see some of these technologies creep through. The first thing we're going to say is, it's a UFO. But the problematics of this is the political problematics of this. Is that where's this defense money going to really go to? I know that they've been trying to officially weaponize space, and they kept getting thrown out of court year after year after year. They're not going to do it, and because it means they have to break the Space Treaty Act, and it's not right. But I think at some point when you're doing something unofficially, and the amount of defense contractors that are involved and all starting to know things.
It's been said you don't look at the defense data, you don't look at the Ministry of Armaments or Defense, you look at the Department of Trade and the patents. And you were mentioning that. That's where the data is. That's where everybody needs to patent something.
They do.
To stop somebody else from
Exactly, and there are lots and lots of things. I mean, there are a number of patents out, and you could look at one of them and say, yeah, that looks like a Tic Tac, But I've actually, when ATIC were pushing out these infrared images of a Tic Tac, I actually had real video footage of the damn thing, which was taken by associates on the shorelines of Mexico. And yeah, I can see that some of these things do look like our materials. They do look. I mean, there's one particular image that I obtained from October of 2019, and it was over Carnival cruises, where they do cruise ships lines there on the Florida coast, and an object came flying over very, very slowly, not that high, only maybe several hundred feet, but shouldn't have been kept aloft because it was going so slow. There was over 20 odd witnesses. There's video footage, and when you look at that video footage, because I had it in the presentation, it looks something like out of a Star Wars film. It's got no recognition numbers on it, no tagging, no representation of country. It just looks something that we've made, and it's technology that is something like looks like out of a Star Wars film. And I go back to those comments when Lockheed said, the guys from Lockheed said, we've got stuff now that would make George Lucas envious, and I believe it. I do. I think we've got some fantastic stuff out there.
Well, you did a fantastic presentation at Probe just last week, and it was to celebrate the progress of the late Sam Wright. Do you want to go through that? Or
yeah,
because the thing which I just sat there. This is the best collection of information and ideas, and all these different effects, all explained or not, all mentioned and put together.
Well, yes. I mean, because the biggest problem is that ufologists have spent so many years now in the study of this phenomenon, not really getting anywhere.
No, not getting anywhere.
Oh, really?
Oh, bloody hell! I didn't realize that. God, sorry.
But it's not.
I'm afraid I have a phrase called ufologist to put an extra O in there. Doesn't make me popular.
It's not just that subject, though. I mean, it also applies to the paranormal. And more modern times, we started to realize, hang on a second, there are references to paranormal phenomena in association to UFO studies. I mean, even if we just want to look at last year's documentation of experiments and research, money from the US government going into specific research into demonic technology. I mean, what the hell is demonic technology? It's in association to the UFO program and so UFO studies. Wormhole technology is
demonic, also... and I heard the word angels referred to some of that. They brought that in and some other. So that these are paranormal phrases in the alien abduction phenomena.
Yes.
And why shouldn't it be? I mean,
well, that's it. I mean, I think started with it. I think what's happened is someone somewhere compartmentalized the subjects. Just took the paranormal, put it over there, put the UFO stuff over there. The paranormal guys would never deal with UFO guys, and vice versa. And we'll never really gain a good picture. But once we started taking all those walls down between the metaphysical, the supernatural, the spiritual, the ufological, paranormal, and threw it all into one great big pot, what I refer to as phenomenology, then what we really started to get was a picture. Because they're all little pieces of a puzzle, it starts to make a picture. And you start to realize, hang on a second, this picture is representable of things from the past as well, things that have happened in the past. And of course, there seems to be a divide. So really, people studying ufology are not going to gain a full picture of what the phenomena truly represents until we start looking at the whole aspects of this woo-woo. Now, for me, it started with shall I share my screen, Miles?
If you want to share the screen, that's perfect. Okay.
That's it. That's fine.
I will simply let you get on with it. Okay.
Okay. So Project Doorway, we've been involved in this study now for about 5 years, and it's about really pushing the science forward and the subject forward and trying to gain answers, because paranormal research and ufological research is so much very static. We should have a lot more answers by now. And I realized, actually, well, what's stopping us? What's stopping us to getting those answers is because we don't have all the information. So what we did is actually Project Doorway looks at breaking down all those problematics of compartmentalization between these subjects to gain some type of conclusive information. Now, as a tip, let me just share this. Yeah. Okay. So as we go through ATIP, we know about ATIP. This is the stuff that ATIP said: anti-gravity lifts, sudden and instant acceleration, hypersonic velocities with no signatures, low observability, cloaking, transmedium travel. At the time they were doing this is what we were kind of doing. We found enough conclusive information to say this phenomena predates historical documentation. It goes back long before we ever think about the subjects of UFOs or even the flying saucer eras from 1950s. It has a paranormal metaphysical attributes to the real true phenomena. It demonstrates a conscious connection. It generates infrasonic frequencies and sounds to its advantage because it knows human limitations. And it utilizes key locations, X points, certain places around the planet for utilizing. And of course, we mentioned it is actually a quad medium travel, like I've mentioned earlier. These things, the true phenomena has the capabilities of penetrating physical things on Earth. This is why when we see the real phenomena enter into the sea, it doesn't leave a wake because it's not connected to our physical environment. That's how they can be seen to going in hills and mountains and that sort of thing. I asked the question also about, human limitations. Out of all mammals on planet, we have the most limits, the most limited types of perception anybody could have is a human compared to all other animals. But what is beyond that? What are we not seeing? What are we not experiencing? Could consist of multiple things. So I refer to it as phenomenology in general. It consists of everything. And I go back to a time when Arthur C. Clarke mentioned a lot about, how would the things strangely be perceived? Well, they'd be perceived as magic, just as, we had old tribes that looked at aircraft and thought, oh, this is magic. They thought they were godly, thought they were deities. And there were references to WSFM on a lot of military documents, CIA documents. And when we realized that what they were doing, they were looking at studies of UFOs. And this reference went on from department to department. What is WSFM? And ufologists looked at it and thought, well, is it some type of special, is it some type of secret program? Is it a location? What is it? Eventually, it says nothing more than weird signs and freaky magic. This was a reference to use because the phenomena consisted of all these different things. And rather than just say it's magic, you just say, oh, it's weird science and freaky magic. WSFM was passed backwards and forwards between different departments when it was associating to the UFO phenomena and researching it and realizing it had all these mechanisms of the paranormal and supernatural aspects. So as we move forward, we start to realize that we are going to be hearing things like references to paranormal Disneylands. This is exactly the same point as key points, these X points where phenomena manifests, paranormal, supernatural, ufological. There's even pages of documentation that the US government have been doing research on what is something referred to as demonic technology. I mean, what is that? What is demonic technology? Well, as far as we're aware, it associates the individual. It's something about belief, can change the outcome of events and those sort of things. And this is why we have a huge amount of history regarding the occult, especially from Germany. From the occult and the fringe studies in regarding UFOs. And of course, fringe ufological studies, the multiplex, and the woo-woo. The woo-woo is more the common name, what is those aspects of this phenomena that people don't want to call it the woo-woo. They don't want to go down. It's too out there. It's too weird to understand. Well, it is. But we do have to understand it. We have to get a grip of it to start realizing what was going on. Now, back in 1967, Jacques Vallée created this AI computer, and he was feeding all this information in, and he was trying to get it to conclude on all the information, all the data that he put input about UFOs, the paranormal, the supernatural, and about the things that happen, the experiences that happen within these fields into this AI to see if it would generate a conclusion as to, will it spit out something which might reference it all and target as to what's going on? Unfortunately, it didn't happen. Technology back then is nowhere near as good as the technology we've got now. But in 2019, there was another AI computer manufactured by a team of researchers. It was known as Advanced CRI. And after 3 years of putting all this data in, specific data, they pressed the button to conclude it. And did it manage to conclude? It managed to conclude something. And what it read was a single source with the capability of creating physiological constructs. Now, a single source. What was being fed into this system was paranormal and UFO and cryptids and all these different types of experiences. But it came out as a single source because the AI realized there's a connection between the UFO and the paranormal, by the paranormal and UFO and the cryptid. These connections. Just for an example, the cryptid phenomenon, people are seeing these cryptids, often report the Oz factor experience, that sudden quietness in that environment. It's like a dead zone, whilst you're joining having this experience. It's the same in UFOs, and we also have similar things taking place in the paranormal. That's just one. And there were multitude of connections. That's why the computer came out and said, it's a single source. It's capable of creating physiological constructs. Physiological constructs are, you, me, if we went up and shook its hand, it's a real thing. Well, yes, that's what the phenomena represents. Sometimes it's metaphysical, sometimes it's a real physical phenomena. So it has the capabilities of creating those things. And the role of human consciousness has to come into play because we've got consciousness of phenomena acting, a non-physical thing happening. And of course, the limitations of our human perception, because everybody perceives differently. And we started to realize that we might have a room full of people, but we all might experience something different of a singular event. And that's what becomes very problematic for computers and AI systems. But we know this from this double slit experiment. It's also known as a dual slit experiment. When electrons alter and change differently when we're observing them, they act differently. And of course, we asked those questions many years ago from the paranormal researchers. In poltergeist infestations, something caught your eye and you turn to look at it and you're watching it and you think, I'm sure that moved. But all of a sudden you decide, okay, well, it didn't. And you turn away only for it to launch across the room as soon as you take your eyes off it. So we have to look at the theories and the mechanism here. Could we possibly be stopping the action by observing it? Because observing things changes the way they work. We know this as a fact through the double slit experiment. We change electrons just simply by watching them. And of course, that applies to everything we experience and see in life. We know that the phenomena itself has this communications, this conscious communication with the observers. It happens all the time. And we hear about how AI and communications are actually developing with the human body. And in fact, telecommunications in a telepathic sense are really not far away. There's already been tests done between France and other countries where telepathic communications are working. There's evidence for that. So we know that this phenomena, no matter what it represents, does have the capabilities of this connection. And we had it with aircraft pilots who were given the shoot down order. It sounds ridiculous, go and shoot a UFO down. But you know what? Did they ever do it? Very, very little, to be honest with you, because by the time they just get the weapons lock on these things, the UFO doing an incredible maneuver and not being able to lose weapon lock. And it happened, kept going on and on and on. And the pilots realized eventually they must know what we're thinking. They must know the pilot's intent. Therefore, even the conscious connection just with military pilots are taking place, not just observers on the ground. We know that hypervasive, the real true phenomena, can be drifting into the infrared. And of course, we can't see it. They know our limitations of what we can experience around us, our hearing, our seeing. And of course, dual camera systems now, which are filming normal and filming infrared, are picking up on the infrared side of that. There is something there, but we can't see it with the naked eye. The standard camera won't see it. And yet, we're finding this quite often because the phenomena is hypervasive. It could be right over our heads, and we wouldn't know. We wouldn't know. They really do maximize the fact that, they know the limitations of the human body and exploit it, really do exploit it. We know about radar systems that they seemingly can be A, appear on radar, B, disappear and reappear again, seemingly at will. It's as if that the physical side of them can become metaphysical at choice. So it's as if you can jump from our physical reality and edge that reality and also onto their reality. And this is why we have these materializations and dematerializations of the true UFO phenomena. I mean, most people will see a phenomena just disappear or reappear rather than the traversing away or traversing coming. They seem to just suddenly appear from nowhere on many occasions. But like I said earlier, the biggest argument about UFOs is the speed. Do we have those massive speeds recorded? Well, we do have massive speeds recorded by UFOs. Up to 20,000 miles an hour. I think the most is 11 miles per second, which is pretty much the same as the escape gravity speed of leaving Earth, funny enough. But we also do have other things traveling at high velocities. And that becomes very problematic now because of the way technology is now, is identifying whose is whose. And we know that they've had the capabilities of shooting down warheads off. It was a dummy warhead actually on missiles. This is all happening whilst they're traveling at 14,000 miles per hour, and they hit it 4 times with a laser. This object enough for the warhead to disengage, and also we have to take into consideration the time this happened. This is 1964. I believe we're dealing with a phenomenon back then, rather than dealing with some type of exotic aircraft. But the problem with that we have with perception is that no matter what people will see, they will always might alter in regards to their description of what they're experiencing. We know that the human eye, we have to look about the human eye and say, well, what's going on with the human eye when we see things? There's an ocular resonance around about 18 hertz that can cause confusion regarding how we're seeing things, what shape are they? And the difference in light recognition is around about 17 milliseconds. So anything oscillating at a certain speed, some people might say it's red, some people might say it's blue or it's green. We have to expect that's going to happen because the way the eye works. And here's a stereotypical example here of a camera being filmed at 24 frames per second, which is the normal rate. A camera, if you just go and land your hand on the camera and pick it up and film, the more likely it's going to be set for 24 frames per second. A lot of mobile phone cameras work in the same fashion. But to prove this, if you apply a same frequency between 23 and 25 hertz to a tube of water and seeing what the effects are on that water is quite amazing.
Try 25 hertz.
25? Okay.
Try 24. The 24 freezes it.
What? What did you say? Is that 24? I'll do 25 now.
I said do 24.
You want 24?
Yeah. Do 23.
Oh, opened it? Nah, nah.
Many people said, oh, it's just a camera effect, you know, it's special effects, something like that. We had to show again that it isn't. In this second video, we can still see what's happening at a 20, I think it's 23 hertz, and you're seeing the water go backwards. It's just a trick the camera does. And it looks to be going backwards. In fact, it's going forwards, and we can prove this by filling up a glass of water at the same time. So now we know we can't trust our eyes. We can't trust the cameras to video record what we really think we're seeing half the time because of these issues. We know that the phenomena generates sounds, humming sounds. There's been Bristol, Teos hum, Pembrokeshire hum in Wales, Copenhagen, Denmark. These strange humming sounds is a lot of it's taking place on the south side of Ireland as well at the moment, on the coastline, where people are hearing this strange humming sound, buzzing sound. It's like a drone. It's like a sound of an old diesel engine running in the background. It drives them mad because it goes on for a long period of time, and they cannot source where the sound comes from. This has been associated to people who have had experiences, people who are just seeing UFOs in the area. It's a mysterious sound from somewhere. It's as if they can feel it. But we do know that they're providing infrasonic frequencies. They generate infrasonic frequencies, this phenomena. We know that many a time when people have reported sighting an object close by, that the surrounding, like I mentioned earlier about that Oz factor experience with cryptids, is that they have this incidence where suddenly it goes completely quiet. It's just like that famous scene from Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters movie, when all of a sudden all the insects just go quiet, everything goes silent, dead. And all of a sudden, you start to have this experience. There's an object nearby. That's only because insects and birds and things can pick up infrasonic sound. Just as we're moving through grass, it's generating infrasonic sound. Crickets can hear that, think it's a predator, and they fall silent. And this is what is a key factor, that this phenomena is utilizing infrasonic sound for their own advantage on many occasions. We might not be able to hear it, you know, because it's infrasound, but it's taking place in the environment more often than we generally thought in regarding around this phenomena. And there's been photographs of these phenomena. Now, this is Project Doorways, photographed by Barry Fitzgerald, who's a colleague of mine, taken in Arizona in September 2012. These are interactive phenomena. They're classed as UFOs, but even the UFO phenomena has to be separated into structural craft and other, because these lights in the sky, we used to think they were solid. There's a solid craft there with an aura around it generating. Now, the evidence that we've got suggests that they're not. They are intelligent. There may be some type of life form, that plasma life form, you know, but they're being described as UFOs. And even if we look at some of the more recent footage we've got, it demonstrates that these things might not actually be solid. Comes into play. There's photographs of these during the day. They're seen during the day in high altitude in the skies. They could have been Foo Fighter type things that were just watching us back in the 1940s. A low observability ones from Arizona in 2019, over the Bermuda in 2011. You know, they generate this arc as well type light, but are they really UFO structural objects? If we look at this particular video, now this one is from the Canada province, and it's a military base. And what they actually were doing here is in infrared is filming 4 objects in the sky over the military base. Now this is in Afghanistan. And what they did is, and it's a remarkable piece of footage, they actually fired upon them. They realized, okay, we're going to fire a missile at them. And a missile actually hits 2 of these objects. Now, these objects are these bright lights that we see, and they're dropping things. We've seen this many times. UFOs are dropping things and seemingly disappearing, as if it's shedding. But then a missile comes in and strikes 2 of these objects, bang, bang. And what happens here, they just reform. They just come back to normal and carry on what they're doing. No interference whatsoever. This is you can see the footage of these objects in as they look normally at night. But it was just tremendous because now we realize some of these things aren't even solid, and we get mixed up as to what is plasma. Is it an intelligent plasma type entity? It's in our skies now, getting mixed up with structural craft. I mean, it becomes very, very problematic as to, what does a UFO really, really constitute? So now we start to have to look at that. We also have structural craft moving at incredible speed. This is Sam Chokey's and Jimmy Chappie's video footage from a drone, which was filming in high definition, and it captures an object, not only banks down, but turns in a sense that it's aerodynamic and shoots across. Now, this happens so fast, they didn't see it, but the drone footage caught it. And statistically looking at this and under analysis, this object, which looks to be kind of flat plate shaped, is traveling 2,300 miles per hour. Sorry, 12,300 miles per hour. It's an object traveling at 12,300 miles an hour. It's an incredible speed. You wouldn't even see it. How many of these things are flying around that we don't see just because we're traveling so fast? I mean, it doesn't seem to be a problem. But lots of people have argued the point about these type of objects, and speed is the giveaway. But I have to argue, like I've said before, rocket engines were built during 1962 and 63, which were capable of 8,500 miles per hour. How fast can we really go now? I expect it's very black. It's be a black budget program we're not going to hear. Now, when I mentioned earlier about Florida over the Carnival cruises, this is an object. It's caught in the sky. There's over 20 witnesses. They're all photographing and videoing it. This is the video of that particular object. And we don't know how it's staying aloft because it travels so slowly, but it doesn't look like any type of UFO you would imagine. In fact, it looks more like some type of experimental craft. Now, when we see this, we think, okay, that's very interesting. But when you look at the photograph speaks volumes. This photograph is that object. You can clearly see it has a cockpit, which is made from glass, even a glass floor, actually. So if you sat there, the pilot could be able to look down directly below him. It looks like it's got two bay holders here for landing legs or something, two very, very large engines. And it looks like it's got two vent systems there, like the Harrier jump jet. So it could possibly be able to take off vertically. No sound, no navigation lights, no markings. It doesn't show any recognition numbers. We don't know who's this. Whose is this? Is it from some other country? Is it from China? Is it from Russia? Are they an observation specialized craft? But how it can clearly travel fast having these large engines by the looks of it. But how is it just staying aloft so slowly without any sound and just drifting slowly across the sky? It looks more like some type of experimental ship, which is being utilized. This is might be the technology that we are, and we do have. It looks like it's come straight out of the Star Wars film, like I mentioned earlier. And we've no idea what these things represent, but the beats are starting to be seen around the country. These are other photographs that are around from different places. These strange and unusual exotic craft that resemble something out of a sci-fi movie are out there. And I think they're ours. I think they're human built. I won't definitely say that they're American, but I would certainly say that they look to be human built. So it's kind of a big thing to suggest now that we are getting mixed up between what is phenomena and what is our technology out there. It become a time when it's next to impossible to work out. And of course, this is footage of the real video footage of a Tic Tac UFO being seen. And this is on the shorelines of Mexico. And it was filmed by a lady called Amber White. And you can see how this object, you can see a tree in the foreground, and how it maneuvers. It doesn't maneuver like any known craft. It starts to stop, turn, jump forward, and back a bit. It is a real video footage of this Tic Tac phenomena. This was obtained whilst ATIP were pushing out, the Pentagon was pushing out FLIR footage camera, from the aircraft, just the thermal videos, when we actually have the real videos. So yes, they're a real thing. And there's plenty of documentation out there in studies of this phenomena, from the light phenomena to the UFO structured craft phenomena. One of those places is Hasdalen in Norway, where the scientific optical reports now are saying that some of these things that are being seen are intelligent light forms rather than just a natural Earth-like phenomena. They act intelligently. Some of them are being captured and analyzed and showing that some of them are very, very unusual. I mean, you can see obviously from spectrographs that have been done that, again, they seem to have this auric light around them, which vary in different colors. But some of them do form into shape. So there is something going on there that is more representable than just a light in the sky. Some of them can be some type of a group of them that come together and make a structure. Very, very strange of those sort of things that are taking place. Now, back in the day, 60s and 70s, there was numerous different reports. In fact, there's several more common ones. One from Cannock Chase from 2015, I believe, where people saw an object close to the ground appear. And what happened is that the car headlights bent towards the object. The car headlights at night bent towards this UFO. They could see it. The people traveling in the vehicle saw the headlights bend. And there's been countless reports of these incidents. Now, if you look at the science behind this, the causing of bend of light has to be a gravitational disturbance. In other words, when a UFO manifests, not two things can exist in the same time and place. So something has to give. What happens is the UFO appears and there's a gravitational distortion, a disturbance there, which light cannot escape, can't even escape gravity waves. And this is why light tends to bend. Now, we've done our own experiments with this, utilizing a time displacement meter or displacement in time meter. Now, these DT meters, they're very, very hard to get hold of. They're very rare, but they're very expensive. And it's 100, 150 foot long probe on these. And it measures the time specifically at the unit, and it measures it at the end of the probe. And when you go to these locations where these manifestations of UFOs have appeared, you get unusual readings. I mean, readings might just say, 18 milliseconds difference in time, but it shouldn't happen. The only way that can happen is if there's miniature black holes. It shouldn't happen. There's a residue left behind in the environment of where these things are manifesting. And what's happening is that these things are manifesting all over the planet. And as we can see, we can do tests with lasers now and know that when we put a laser and line it up and we're in a place where UFO activity is happening, then we can start to see the effects of laser light being bent by a magnetic disturbance. And we can see that just in this short video here. You can see this is a ferrocell, and the light from the laser is being scattered to the edge of the ferrocell. And you can see how it's been disturbed. The beam of light is bending because there's a magnet being put near it. Now, we've done tests in these environments and showing that sometimes, the bending of the light happens because there's a gravitational distortion in that environment. The gravitational distortion seems to be a residue of some of the UFO phenomena that's taking place, some of it even close to the ground. So there are tests that can be done that can show this. But when we look at the paranormal side, if we look at the Vril Society, it used to be the Society for Metaphysical Studies, in 1921, became the Vril Society in Germany. They said that they were communicating with some type of beings. They said they were beings known as the Aryan race, and were giving information to these medium circle, which was being given over to the SS or the special departments, which were manufacturing devices and things that was information that was being given to them during these mediumistic circles. And what happened with the Real Society? They just disappeared one day, just vanished for no reason whatsoever. But that method of obtaining information came through mediumistic circles with these beings. Exactly the same thing happened during the skull experiment. Exactly the same. You know, we have physical phenomena taking place, such as a newspaper, Apport, which coincidentally aged 500 days per day after that, and that's how it went brown so fast. We're communicating with something that took over the circle. They lost the circle to these entities. And anybody who's a medium when doing these mediumistic circles, these seances, will say it's all about controlling the circle, you know, and keeping that level of energy and meditation and all those sort of things. They lost control to entities, which they took photographs of them, and they had things caught on film as well of these blue-faced figures, which they refer to as the entities. And there was apparently not just the odd 2 or 3 of these, but hundreds of them possibly were trying to infiltrate the mediumistic circle. Now, the image to the left here is of Lamb, which is the name of an entity, an interdimensional entity, exactly the same thing what Aleister Crowley was communicating with back in 1918. It's exactly the same phenomena, just from 2 different variations in time, from Skull 1998 to 1918. And yet they both claim that they were entities, interdimensional entities. The problem is, Skull experiment lost control and they had to shut down. In fact, it became dangerous to a point. But before Robin Freud, unfortunately, Robin Freud, who ran the Skull experiment in the UK from Skull, who passed away several months back, but we did talk with him and we found out that these strange blue figures infiltrated his life. They never left him. It carried on. And it can cause some issues, you know. So sometimes just by opening this doorway of communicating with what we might think are alien beings or interdimensional entities, sometimes can have a bit of a sting in the tail. Sometimes it can cause chaos. It can attach you to your life. It can travel through life with you, you know, not ending. And I think that's what's the situation with Robin Freud. We had 2 women, completely different women from 1974 to 1961, Stella Lansing, Dorothy Izat, which were capturing this phenomena on cinefilm. They knew when to go and film it as well. They suddenly got this urge to get up and go and film. And then what happened is that suddenly you find out they caught UFOs and paranormal things on camera. And they couldn't understand the reasons how they were managed to do it. And of course, we look more recently at Skinwalker Ranch. This is one of those locations where I say it's an X point. It's these X points, phenomena is taking place. And the phenomena is consistent of UFO, supernatural, paranormal. There's 3 elements to this. And now if we look at Bigelow, Robert Bigelow, you know, and he was there with the NIDS team. Now, there's recent information up on YouTube from February of last year where he actually did eventually spill the beans. He said, he wished he'd never had. He wished he didn't get involved. He wished he didn't prod the subject of trying to contact these entities at Skinwalker Ranch with the NIDS team because it had a sting in its tail. And that sting in the tail went right through Robert's life. He lost his wife, he lost his brother, he lost his son, he lost his grandson, and he was just an absolute nightmare for him. He wasn't the only one. There were other NIDS investigators who reported the same thing. They took this phenomena back home with them. It became a very negative streak in their lives. Sometimes, if you prod the beast too much, it will follow you. It will infiltrate your life and it will cause upset, it will cause damage, it will cause problems. And this sometimes happens. This phenomena does have a sting in its tail, and you do need to know when to step back, when to leave it. And of course, there is a process of learning that. But Skinwalker Ranch is one of those places. We've had our own team there filming and doing things over the years. And we realized that even us, this is a video piece from Barry Fitzgerald, who was there at Skinwalker Ranch, one of our guys from Project Doorway. And he filmed the phenomena. You know, it is there, it is taking place, and people are seeing cryptids, large cryptids. They were described as seeing giving chase to one cat. There was one cow that was being chased down the road by one of these cryptids, which was seen by local neighbours at other farms. but it's very, very frightening for them. They don't like to talk about it. How these strange lights just seem to appear in the sky and we don't know what they represent. But they were captured even by our team whilst we were there at Skinwalker. Skinwalker is just one of many, many places around the country. But physical phenomena does manifest there because it leaves markings in the ground. This is dry desert ground. It's about 4 inches deep, this hole. Whatever made these impact marks is heavy, very, very heavy physical things. And these things just appear overnight as if something had just landed there. There's incidents about prize bulls going missing on Skinwalker Ranch, and they were actually found jammed in this container in a dazed, hypnotic state. Now, there was no way that they could even have got in there, and yet they were squeezed in somehow. There's no way you're going to squeeze one of these massive animals in there. Not if you want to, be careful with your life, because these things are huge, powerful beasts. And yet, as soon as he went in there, they seemed to wake up from this daze, and they almost tore this whole place apart getting out. How they got in there, we don't know. The whole thing took about 45 minutes from disappearing to being found. And that was the only location they found them in, because they looked all over the ranch panicking that these things had been taken, and yet they were, and they were just in this dazed state. The phenomenon does this a lot. It likes to play its tricks and games. The story of a dire wolf, which is supposed to have disappeared over 10,000 years ago, appeared on the ranch and attacked one of the cattle. And the owners were stood literally right next to this thing shooting, and lumps of flesh and fur were coming off this thing. It didn't make any difference. It just carried on doing what it wanted to do, and then eventually just strolled away slowly. I mean, it's just impossible how that could have happened. There is one photograph here, and that photograph is the only photograph in existence of that animal. And according to its size, it's the size of roughly what a dire wolf would be, which is about 10,000 years ago. These very large wolves were supposed to have gone completely non-existent. That sort of phenomena happens, but we get the same things with Bigfoot and crypto type stuff, where people said, we shot it, but this thing should have gone down, made no difference. We had it during the Hotskinville UFO incidents of small beings with big ears. They shot them. It didn't do any good. It's this metaphysical type of phenomena that applies to all aspects of this. Same sort of strange things that happened with cows and cattle in the farm of Ripperston Farm in 1977, Broadhaven, Wales. I mean, this place was a thrive of UFOs for a short period of time. Very large, silvery-looking beings which were seen near this ranch, and the ranch owner who reported that his cows just disappeared. He ended up, as he's locking his cows up, he had a phone call. He locked them up. He went to the phone. He answered the phone. It was a neighbor down the road saying, your cows are in my field. He said, no, I've just locked them up. He said, no, they're your cows. You have to come and collect them. And he was totally puzzled. He didn't understand. So he goes back to the cow shed, which you can see top left-hand corner here. And he realizes they're all there. Everything's shut down. Everything's locked, but no cows, no cattle. Everything was there regarding all the locking, and everything locks was still on, no cattle. And he goes down the road about several miles, the nearest farm, his cattle's there. No explanation. I mean, it's as if even in some cases, even time comes into play, and these strange, deceptive tricks and Joker type experiences that these people happen. But people have to look at these places where incidents are happening, like small grey beings appearing in the bedroom visitation, light coming through the window. Suddenly the people report paralysis. It's exactly the same thing as seeing shadow figures or apparitions in rooms when you wake up, and you have this paralysis. Because during paralysis, we have what is referred to is this sleep process, rapid eye movement, where we are paralyzed. And the phenomenon just utilizes what we already have to go about its business, because it knows our limitations. And one of the biggest things is about understanding this phenomenon. I've had this experience numerous times. The last time I had it was in Palm Springs in the desert, in the mountains up there. And I was with Associate Barry Fitzgerald, several other people. And we knew where to go, because this was an X point. This was a place where which NASA refers to as an electron diffusion region, where there's so much positive magnetics around, the plus 250 Teslas, that phenomena seems to be like UFOs manifest there. And when they do, they can put on a lovely, colourful display, which is colourful. It's as if the glamour. And what's happened is that they put on these wonderful shows of glamour, and you're hypnotized literally to these. But what we didn't realize is what was on the ground behind us. Whilst we're all literally dazed by looking at this tremendous object, it was something else going on behind us. And that's what you've got to be aware. It's a bit like the magician's hand, look at this and not this. And that can happen sometimes. Again, it's not all love and light. There is problems with this phenomena, and it can be deceptive and trickery. And before you know it, you can be involved in an incident with this phenomena that you think, oh, I wish I never did. And it was that simply that what we do when we go out to these locations is rely on ourselves, our body functions. And what we realized is that it's refined sugar is one of the biggest problems we have. Now, everybody has refined sugars, I get that. But it is a very addictive poison, but it does one particular thing to the body. It causes adrenal weakness, which means it's disconnecting our fight or flight sensors. Now, people have reported those fight and flight sensors before with UFOs, the paranormal. Suddenly the hairs go up on your arm. You get that feeling that something's not right. Goosebumps, call it what you will. It's that survival sense. It's your skin. It's our skin. It's the biggest organ on the body reacting. And it's that survival sense saying, I might not see something, I might not hear something, but something is in my environment and I do not like it. It's a warning mechanism, and it internally switches on because we realize there's something's not right. We need to become reliant on that. Now, what I do is when I'm out there doing research and location, I'll starve myself for 72 hours. You only have to starve yourself of refined sugar for 72 hours, and suddenly you become so aware of your natural fight or flight. And that is what we need to rely on when experiencing this phenomena, because sometimes it will trigger and people will be taking, because of these beautiful lights, will be taking steps towards this phenomena when in fact your body's screaming at you, get the hell out of there, because it isn't all love and light. And this is what is the true aspects of ufology. People don't want to tell you that. People don't want to tell you that people have been maimed, people have been killed by this phenomenon. They don't want to say that. They want to try and keep it, it's all love and light and don't worry about it. Yeah, that's not true. We have to understand the human body. That the T4 vertebrae, the thoracic vertebrae, when his problems there, we know it's an indicator to being maneuvered whilst you're paralyzed. It happens to abductees all the time. And I had a very interesting conversation with the Foundation Research of Extraterrestrial Encounter, free, and it was just formulated by Edgar Mitchell, astronaut Dr. Edgar Mitchell. And they were really intrigued about how suppression of even these entities which are invading people's homes under the abduction contact experience can be subdued in certain ways by utilizing UV lamps, by utilizing iron, believe it or not, raw iron materials. I mean, when we talk about raw iron, we think about the lucky horseshoe. There's nothing about luck. It was put up there for a reason above doors, and it's to ward away the bad stuff. That's what it's used for. It's because of its content, its material. And it was never about luck or not lucky charms. But we know that the UFO phenomena has those connections with the paranormal. Even Spielberg put it in. When you ask the question, in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, did you see the Poltergeist film? Many people, the Poltergeist scene, people have said, well, what Poltergeist scene? I've not seen Poltergeist scene. And they have to be reminded, when the Hoover starts flying around the kitchen, the taps start turning on, the things start moving around, that these objects come down trying to take her son, that's a poltergeist type activities happening. Spielberg put that in there on purpose because he wanted a true aspect of what this phenomena truly represents. Not only the ufological, but it also involves the paranormal and the parapsychological. We know for CE5, the protocols of this is exactly the same things as the seance room. You take 5 mediums and put them around a table, you can conjure phenomena. During some of the skull experiments, small UFOs were conjured. They were seen to be physical, plate-sized UFOs moving round the table. And at the same time they were moving around like this, they fired a light down on the table. It always stayed on its point. They could feel mass to these things. Balls of light that you could feel weight to could be covered in your hand. The light would come through your hand. These things were taking place as manifestations, drawing around a seance table during the skull experiment. The same thing as having 5 meditators on location during a CFI protocol, and something manifests. The conjuring process happens around the spirit table, around the skies, especially in locations where UFO activity is being seen. And it's the same process seemingly is starting to take place. We look at this image of Lamb from 1918, 1919. Aleister Crowley is drawing is very, very similar to this particular photograph, which is currently at this time circulating the internet from Stephen Greer's protocols contact, where he says an entity was photographed. I mean, I'm looking in comparison of these two, and they look almost identical. I mean, we're talking, we're talking considerable length of time between these two entities appearing. One with Aleister Crowley, the second within the circles of Stephen Greer. I mean, it looks to be that we're dealing with the same phenomena. The phenomena seemingly has to change its mask from time to time. Now, don't get me wrong, there are physical things that can happen through belief. We know stigmata can happen, the spontaneous appearance of these wounds on the body. I mean, the parapsychological sense for this would be SISPM, spontaneous the wounds that appear on the body, the physical markings. And we know it can happen. So we know that just a belief in conjuring some of this stuff happens, because this is a physical aspect of that conjuring, the belief. A hot 2p piece, through hypnosis, we say, we put a 2p piece on your arm and it's hot. Sometimes they'll blister. The physicalities of it isn't there. It's the mental thought process that generates the physical world around us, in a sense of speaking. And these balls of light are exactly the same with orbs, exactly the same with the Foo Fighter type stuff. Even paranormal locations that seem to have football-sized balls seen moving around the office, which have been seen and captured by people. And this one is probably the most significant of analysis that's ever been created. This is a photograph of 2 mugs. The mug on the left, the A mug, is the apported mug during a poltergeist infestation. It was a mug that was put on the side, waiting for a cup of tea, and disappeared for over 90 minutes to appear in a most ridiculous place. And it was an apport. But that apported mug was taken away with a normal mug, which came from the same pack, to be analysed. And it was analysed under microscopy, atomic microscopy. And this is 3 levels of that. And when we did this, we realised that the weight of the mugs were the same. They felt the same, they looked the same, they weighed the same. In fact, you wouldn't know if there was any difference between them until you put it under the microscope. When we put it under the microscope, we realize if we have a level of authenticity, the information that we received suggested that it's not even the mug at left. It's not, it shouldn't be. It's because the makings of mug A are massively different than mug B. And under the microscope, we can see the significant difference. And one of the most prominent differences was this diathermic reaction, the incredible diathermic reactions that had taken place in the apported mug. Now, what we believe that obviously what happens is that when those apports are taken away, sometimes phenomena follows them. And when they're left in the homes, it just carries on that daily phenomena. People experiencing terrible events every single day. But when we took these objects away, phenomena at that location subdued. It's as if the phenomena didn't know where to go. The phenomena tracked and followed the object, the apport, rather than person's home for a few days. Eventually, it does catch up. But they were surprised because they said we were having activity every single night, and all of a sudden, it stops for 3 days, and that's the 3 days you took the mug, because phenomena seemingly follows that apport. So we realize that there's a possibility that's using these mugs, the phenomena, as a target, as like an anchor, a quantum bridge between the phenomena and where's it going to manifest. It's going to manifest in the location where the apport is. And of course, when we read out this diathermic reaction, we thought we've seen this before. Where have we seen this diathermic reaction before? And we realized eventually it was in a UFO incident that came very close to the ground. And what happened during that incident is that the UFO, which suddenly manifested from nowhere, affected the plants underneath it. Scientists came in, took away those plants, and is what is referred to as a biological traumatology test. And they conducted a test on it. And what was really interesting is that they found the exact diathermic reactions in the plants as we did the mug, which suggests on a physicality that the manifestation of this UFO and the manifestation of a mug in the paranormal are utilizing the very same physics that are involved. Another combination process, which leads us to believe, well, you know, if these UFOs are coming from the vast distances of space and the paranormal is a very old earthly phenomena, why are they both the same physics? It doesn't make sense. And the more you start to dig and build this picture, you start to realize it's all one source. It is, as it was mentioned back when artificial intelligence said, it's all one source. It's capable. It's changing its appearance. It has many, many different masks. It plays tricks and does things, but what we've done is we've separated them. That's got to be paranormal. That's got to be UFO. That's got to be cryptid. But when you draw them all in together, you realize they're all made of the same mechanisms. You know, this phenomena, cryptids love these type of areas, boulder fields, rocks, mountains. The UFO phenomena does. And in many cases, when people are living in those locations, they have heightened amounts of paranormal phenomena taking place. There's a very, very strong geological connection with this phenomena. I'm not saying that it could be up in the sky. I'm saying it has a very strong geological connection. You know, lots of people in ufology will recognize this image. It's giant rock. And it was the most famous, it's the second largest rock in the world, freestanding rock. But people will recognize it because it was connected to the UFO program and UFO studies and UFO conferences from the early 1950s, because it was the place where apparently UFOs were seen. But if you actually go back in time and look at the details, how this came about, it started off with entities coming out of the rock, not UFOs in the sky, entities coming out of that rock and talking with individuals. Like I said, there's a lot of this phenomenon that has a very, very strong geological connection. And when we start to look at these geological connections, we realize there are X points. These are measurable by satellites. Now, you can do this even at home. You can go and get Google Maps. You can apply certain KMZ filters to them. I suggest magnetic regions, gravitational anomalies, and so on and so forth, and apply them, and you can look at key locations. And when you look at these key locations, you realize these are in locations of plus 250 nanoteslas. It's not by chance that phenomena seems to manifest around these locations. It's seen, I mean, we took thousands of cases, you know, I mean, there's just a few demonstrations, but when we look at the scope of information that we have over 2,000 different entities being seen. Over 2,000, where are they coming from? Over 2,000 different planets. There's over 30 types of grey just alone. But is there a sense of where we get this information now, where they're extraterrestrial? It comes from the entities. It's not coming from anywhere else. It's coming from the entities saying, we come from this planet, we come from that planet. We're here to do this, we're here to do that. But the question has to arrive, are we being fed a one-liner here? You know, just as the small children of the aerial school in Zimbabwe were said about the ecology of the earth. I mean, what little young kid's going to know about that? And the same sort of thing gets said over and over again, because they say things, you know, and they don't really mean them, these entities. Don't worry, you'll be fine. And they'll do something that might affect them physiologically for the rest of their lives. damaged retinas that are burned, or scars, never really get over it in a lifetime. How much did he really care about us? And how much did he really care about the planet? I think they care much more about the planet than they do of humankind. But we have to ask the question, where are all these coming from? Are there all these different variations of these entities, or is there a single source? Because they make mistakes sometimes. They'll appear in a craft which is too small for them to carry them all. Sometimes those crafts might have portholes and rivets on. You think, what? That doesn't make any sense. Are we really perceiving what it's supposed to be? I think they make mistakes sometimes in regarding how they manifest and the perception of them. But are we dealing with a phenomena shifting its mask? The same phenomena, just a different mask. And we might see in 20, 30 years' time that we might come away from the greys and it'll be something else, because it's seemingly changed as time's gone on. The earliest of this phenomena goes back to 700,000 BC in Botswana, where it was serpent worship. Serpents were the time of the first things that were attempted to be seen. And are these entities, which are supposed to be very nice, and are they good and bad? Because when we say, the Greys don't bother with these guys and these Nordics don't bother with the Greys, you look at Travis Walton case where they're both involved. Was it that just Travis panicked? These things didn't know what to do. And then basically next minute, let's create this. There's a lovely person there and he's not going to talk with you, but he's going to get you the hell off our ship. And that's exactly what that was kind of devised to do, to change the process of how they looked at him, to manage the situation. Who knows? Or are we dealing with variable entities that seem to shift how they are perceived to humankind? But iron is a very good thing to use. It's a very good thing to dissuade paranormal phenomena. It's an age-old process. It's been going back for many, many times. Even King Tut, had his own special iron-made dagger, which was, according to scriptures and stuff, it was for not only battling in death with spirit, but it was also for the living. But they found out that this iron didn't even come from planet Earth. It came from an iron meteorite. The lucky horseshoe I mentioned before, it's about the iron. It's not about a lucky charm. It's the same for many things, and pendants. It's also the same for when the Irish people used to, in early days, used to put iron rods across the cribs to stop children being abducted in the night. And even in, if you look at the jinn and look at Eastern countries, they're using hematite and things and iron to ward away the jinn. It's the same thing, a different name, different mask, same phenomena. And even in medieval times, we only have to look at the divide between graveyards and churches by raw iron. That whole process is still there. It's in plain sight. And yet it still does work. What we know, that it doesn't work underground. So when you're in cave systems and you're dealing with phenomena underground, it doesn't seem to help protect you in any way. But it does seem to be something advantageous above ground regarding these things. I mean, in medieval days, they'd be banging iron nails in round beds to stop nightmares from having the evil ones coming at night. It's still there. It still can be utilized. And we've had a good success rate in people with bad night terrors, people who claim that they're having tremendous paranormal disturbances, people who claim that entities, small entities, UFO-related entities are being seen in their bedrooms. There seems to be, when we ask them, look, wear iron, have some iron around them, seems to help, seems to deter the phenomena. So where are all the UFOs coming from? Roughly every 10 seconds around the planet being seen. These guys at SETI say, no way, these guys are saying space is, what is they saying? Unusually quiet. It's a strange thing, but space is unusually quiet. Where are they coming from? It's not all love and light. We know this from the Colaris UFO incidences from 77, 78, where people were being abducted. Where people were being attacked by these beams of light. The big question, is there a difference between aliens and demons and angels and all these things, or are they all masks of a phenomena that the artificial intelligence computer says is the source? There's one source capable of doing all these things. One of the biggest problems of these encounters in 77, 78 on Colares, small island off the shores of Brazil, when these objects came from the sea and attacked the villagers. It was all tried to be cooled down and quietened down, but it wasn't. The truth of the matter is over 1,200 people were attacked. And what happened to them? Some of them died. Some of them were severely, severely injured, because when these beams of light come out of these objects, they penetrate the walls, they penetrate the roofs of the houses and hit them whilst they're in bed. There was no escaping them. And as soon as they wake up, they're in absolute agony, agonizing pain, and cannot move, paralysis, until the event is over. And what's left is several puncture hole marks. But what was also found when all these people went into hospitals for tests because they were severely injured or they were very ill, is that the iron content was taken out of the bodies. The iron was removed. Again, the phenomena was removing the iron. I believe the phenomena was prepping these people for contact, for regular contact with them. This isn't the first time this has happened. It's happened before. But if you look at Colares, there is where these incidents took place. Again, is one of those places where you might refer to is a very potent, positive magnetic region. And you see the puncture hole marks here. But there's true statistics we're trying to be covered over. It's not the only place it's happened. It's placed all over the world where those attacks happen. There was one here in India that appeared in the newspapers, and they were trying to keep it quiet, saying it was down to insects. It wasn't. It was, again, very like Colares, a small town, no policing, no military. These things came from nowhere, attacked the villagers. It was as if there's an agenda. But I have to say, when you look at the phenomena, you've got to look at it as a total. And in UFO phenomena, you have to take the good with the bad. You have to understand that sometimes you don't know what type of experience you're going to have. If you take Luis Barroso, who had this experience with a UFO and an entity, it fired something at him, it literally made him go backwards in his mind to a child. His body aged very quickly, became grey. And when he died, it was at a time when he couldn't even understand English properly. He couldn't speak. He couldn't feed himself. He had to be looked after like a baby. There was over 17 professional doctors that looked at this guy in the hospitals, and they could not diagnose him. They have never, ever seen anything like it before. And that was only because an entity fired a light at him. And obviously he went down, and that was the end of that. He lasted for a few more years until he died. But he went backwards in mind, but aged physically very quickly. This gentleman down here on the right was from Crab Island. You can see a very large hole inside of him, very burn mark. Again, an object fired a beam of light at him, almost killing him. But you don't get to hear these things. The first time information came out about these positive magnetic regions was back in 1982, when Philip Corso said that the US government were monitoring 7 major magnetic anomalies in association with UFOs. They're still doing it today. We know that these places are visible all over the planet. If we can measure them and go to these locations, the likelihood are they're going to be in places where not much stuff is out of sight of normal people, because it is hypervasive sometimes, this phenomena. We know that gravitational disturbances are somehow kind of connected to where the phenomena manifests, because it has a geological connection. And we have to question about what is that agenda? What do they want? And has there been a ruse? Is the ruse to look up at the sky, to think that these things are traveling from the distances of space in their ships, solid metal ships with specialized engines? I don't think so. I think that a phenomena like this, if it was that clever, would utilize a better way of traversing the universe. But this phenomenon doesn't seem to be like that. It seems to be right here under our noses and can manifest at any stage. We know that these positive magnetic regions are also good places where bacteria doesn't seem to like. We know that from these new hospital doors. These new hospital doors have a seal around them, a positive magnetic seal around them, recovery wards, purposely because bacteria is not good at surviving crossing the magnetic wave. And we find that these positive magnetic regions There are places where bacterial levels are down. So it's a wonderful place for phenomena to manifest, because it's got a good place to manifest, bacterial levels are down, and a good place to depart. It's like an operating doctor with his gloves on. It's kind of a good place. It's a clean place, good place to come in, good place to leave. You know, we're finding these locations all over the place. And when we look at geologically, you know, there's videos of volcanoes and phenomena taking place, manifesting light phenomena, things coming out from the lights. This is a highly geological location, and we see this phenomena all the time. Objects firing out of them at incredible speeds. There's a strong connection between the geology, volcanoes, hills, mountains going into the ground, and this phenomena, more so than the sky. But like I say, we did over 2,000 surveys regarding the most significant UFO events that have taken place in history, and what were the conditions of the environment. Over 250 plus nanotesla, again, where this Flatwoods monster incident took place from 1952. It's a very famous case, but the location makes it very interesting. Exactly the same for the Hotskinville UFO incident, plus 250 Tesla. Skinwalker Ranch, you know, the Mothman incidents around Point Pleasant. You know, the incidents, and poor Travis, who was in the heart of 250 nanoteslas there. The A70 abduction in Scotland. It's right on the borderline of that 250 plus nanoteslas. Broadhaven UFO incidents. School children saw this thing come down in the school, but it's just right on the tip. It's just right here, where it starts to reach 250 nanotesla. And we see this again, Zamora case, and again, Zimbabwe. And it just, this list goes on and on and on. But the most alarming thing is that these are also seemingly connected with disappearances. And I don't mean just normal disappearances, I mean strange disappearances, where they're walking with you, next you turn around, they're gone within a second, never to be seen again. These have been covered by David Pilates in his 411 missing 411 books. They're in the same locations that seemingly are happening. No wonder the police aren't touching these things. There's too much to try and explain away here, how people can just suddenly 1 second be there and next second be snatched away, never to be seen again. And if you look statistically of how many people have been disappeared on planet Earth under these circumstances, under these very, very strange circumstances, it's about 4.5 million people. Now that's alarming. That means that's roughly the amount of people that are living in New Zealand. And we're being conservative here. We're being conservative here regarding the disappearances. Where they disappear, if you open up a map and you look where the positive magnetic regions are, and when the people have disappeared, they're in the positive magnetic regions. It's incredible that these things are happening. And why is it not being alerted more? That there's a strong connection in these areas to UFOs, to cryptids, to paranormal phenomena taking place, and these massive, strange disappearances are happening. This just doesn't make any sense. Magnetic anomalies has a lot to account for. Negative ones, which is the minus 250 Teslas, are places where you'll find mass suicides, very strong illnesses, high levels of crime. You know, there are kind of better places, good points, bad points to where you want to live on planet Earth. The neutral zones are kind of white, yellow. Those are very good. Orange is fine. You know, but they got these key, I mean, phenomena, it's only because of the phenomena in the red and the pink, but negative ones, those are the ones which are dark black almost, minus 200 Tesla. But we have professionals now come forward and said about reality. There is evidence of other realities. This is one person that came forward from Smithsonian Magazine in 2011. Dr. Lisa Randall from Harvard said, "I believe an extra dimension may exist close to our familiar reality, hidden except for bizarre sapping of strength of gravity as we see it." And I talked about before that there are these gravitational anomalies associated with this phenomena. And we can prove that now. Now, NASA are not hiding it. NASA said we launched an MMS mission, which launched out into space, And what they did is to investigate these X points in space, just outside of Earth's gravity, so atmosphere. And as we go out there, we come across these. And these are, and they've used this in their own words, portals, sustainable large portals. These are real. Now, the fact is that they're actually saying this and they're telling us. They like to use that professional name, which is electron diffusion region. But if you want to find out about this, all you've got to do is type NASA and portal into YouTube, and they'll tell you. There's a nice little information package that comes up like this, and it will tell you about how they have discovered portals, wormholes. And this is why the governments, the US government, are studying these things. There are these anomalies all around. There are geological anomalies in space. There are UFOs that are seemingly coming out of the moon, coming out of the sun. But occasionally, the ones that are seen on planet Earth don't seem to be a high traffic amount going backwards and forwards. We'd expect to see thousands on this superhighway traffic backwards and forwards for Earth. We don't have that. So the ways these objects are getting here are more seemingly manifesting, just as they would like in the paranormal act. Even the moon has a magnetic anomaly. According to Professor Sarah Stewart of Natural Sciences, she said it's a conundrum because the moon, the magnetic anomalies on the moon are not correlated with any surface geology because the moon doesn't have this magnetic field, doesn't have it. So why are they just grouped in a small location on the far side of the moon only? We have to question about why NASA have kept things like strange sounds recorded from the moon whilst passing over that particular location as part of Apollo 16, buried that information and recordings for 40 years. For 40 years. These objects still coming out the moon, recorded on a daily basis and seen by Soho. And we have to question all about this phenomenon, its connections with the paranormal, the supernatural, the way that they're hooking us into the theme of the UFO. It's everywhere. They want to keep us indoctrinated in the fact that UFOs are real, that aliens are real, but not ask the proper questions such as, where's it coming from? How is it manifesting? You know, what does the government know? And even in letting children know, school children all around the UK, there's over 100 schools now in the UK that are being taught about UFO crash sites. We have to ask the question. We're keeping that information prominent. We're teaching the young children about the subject. But the big questions are that this phenomena, you know, we have to say where it's coming from. But our ancestors knew, our ancestors kind of understood that's an interdimensional, metaphysical, supernatural, spiritual type intelligence. Project Doorway is the first of a scientific study in the advancement of this science behind the phenomenology, because we have to say phenomenology because it's UFOs, it's the paranormal, it's the spiritual, the metaphysical. All these things have to be looked at and redefined now under a new lamp, a new light, and move forward with new forms of experimental research to try and figure out why are we still static in these studies when we shouldn't be. And when we bring all these things together, it's giving us clues where to advance to. So we have one released of the official documents from Project Doorway. We've got 9 others that have been sent out. And just to finish off, there was when we first sent this information out and about, I was in talks with a gentleman who runs the Scientific Coalition of UAP Studies, and he said before me that Professor Hal Pultop and Eric Davis was aware of our stuff, and we joined. We got asked to join. We joined, and we're part of a think tank in the US and one in the UK as well, and we're correlating information backwards and forth because what we know is that we've been told we've got to gather the information. It's not ready for scientists to just divulge in yet. We've got to, well, now they've been introduced to the subject since the Pentagon coming out of all this UFO and UAP stuff, is that the scientists have to take it in tiny chunks. Because if it suddenly lands on their plate and it's so much woo-woo, it's going to scare them away. That tells me that this phenomena, it exists within the woo-woo. And it's the areas that have been looked on and thought, no, let's not go there. And that's the reasons why we're not actually getting the full picture. But we have brought out a very specialized book. And when we brought this out, which is this one, it covers all the.
Actually, do you want to stop sharing screen? I can continue with those, because if you want to show books on that, or do you have much more of that presentation? Is that
Oh,
it?
that's it. That's the end of the presentation.
Do you want to show that book again on full screen now that you're on full screen?
Oh, yes, can do. Yeah. So we brought this book out purposely. Obviously, you'll be reading it back to front of that book.
And I notice you're showing the German diagrams of whatever they were doing.
Well, yeah, because we have to ask the question: where's the information derived from? You know, I mean, is this supposed to be through the readings of communications through mediumship? So it's derivative of a paranormal act. You see, so it's the same thing as doing the seances from the early 1600s, 1500s, 1400s. You know, it's the same process of obtaining that information. And basically,
now, there's a brilliant bookshop here in Devizes, and they can get these sort of books. Where can people get that? Do you want to hold it up clearly?
Yeah, well, this actually can only be obtained through us at this moment.
Okay.
It's a scientific investigation process document, and it goes through the whole process about the UFO phenomena. It's devised.
So, how much is it? Where do they get it from? Exactly.
They can contact us directly at phenomenamagazine.co.uk. If you go onto there and just click courses, you can find out all the information about these. When this first came out, it was surprisingly MUFON investigators start doing it, you know, because it's for the 21st century ufologist that has to introduce these other elements to find answers and do research in a certain way, and it starts to. There is something I can tell you now, Miles, we are on the cusp of change in regarding the study.
This is absolute music to my ears.
It's been there.
I think this is absolutely the finest. I mean, I'd had a chat with Barry, but it turns out my hometown of Lurgan may have black goo anomalous. The reason for the name Lurgan, I understand, is it's the place of the black rock.
Yes.
Now, the thing is, you've got County Antrim, which has got black basalt in it. It's all full of the bloody stuff. So why does Lurgan exist, and what's so strange about the black rock there? And there are a team of people who've been looking at things there, and it just turns out that just at Lurgan Golf Club, beside Brownlow House, which is Lurgan Castle, I observed some phenomena like huge jellyfish beings coming through a portal, and just across where the Lurgan Lake is and where the park is, there's been a lady there observing stuff for like 30 years, and she had the good sense to shut up and not tell anybody. And she told me, and I went to Ireland there, I think just in 2018, and we were going to do a whole lot of stuff. And one of her colleagues, I mean, she's talking about a wet oil coming from this black rock, and of course that is the black goo stuff, the intelligent sentient fluid. And then of course we're talking about the stuff that the Germans got, and a major trophy of the Falklands War was the recovery of this stuff that the Germans had been refining in Thule Island. You know, it just so happens that there's a Thule Island in the South Atlantic, which just so happens to be a German post World War II refueling base, which just so happened to be a centre of interest during the Falklands War, which just so happened to be what the British recovered, I think 400 crates of this sentient oil.
Yeah.
But this seems to be some of the, and with this stuff seems to have arrived about 10,000 years ago-ish. And I'm born on one of the...
Are you?
Yeah, and the whole thing was that when I went over to investigate this, they wouldn't say a thing. They wouldn't be recorded on anything.
No, I found that myself. People won't talk.
They just wouldn't talk. So anyway, I handed it over to Barry, you know, since he's there and I'm here.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like I say though. Again, it's like there's a very strong connection geologically.
Yeah.
With the phenomenon, which people just always look it up rather than
this is the advanced studies of unexplained atmospheric phenomena. It seems to be a heck of a lot more easier to pronounce than the stuff that they came out with at that briefing. This has been an amazing presentation. This is a presentation you gave at Probe, giving to Sam Wright, the late Sam Wright, and it's wonderful that they're continuing on that great work that he did. I have to say, Sam did like to sort of, if it annoys the government, then I'm doing a good job.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And this work you've done, this is, as
Well,
I cannot. This is just so wonderful.
It's a step in the right direction.
It's a huge leap in the right direction.
We got to get back on the process of research and study and new areas of research and study. You know what? I don't think it's by chance though. I think it's been done purposely. The compartmentalization that broke these pieces apart makes us just look at several studies alone. It's only when we brought them together we started to hang on a second. There's a lot more going on, and now with artificial intelligence computers saying it's a source, it's responsible, might change its aspects and colors and shapes and perceptions, but the mass is always changing. But it's a source. It sees the connectivity between them all and says, well, there's so much connectivity, it has to come from a source.
Well,
so
many people talk about, as Dave Allen, the great wise sage Dave Allen, used to say, may your God go with you. But that's a comedian, an Irish comedian who used to wind up the church, for those who don't know this great comedian. But a lot of people are talking about source, about, on this spirituality side, go to source or whatever.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more connectivity than what meets the eye. But I think it's been done purpose to take us in the wrong direction. But now we're starting to put the pieces together. We're slowly moving in a better direction. It might not be what we generally thought. I mean,
this is the best stuff I've heard in my entire life. I have to say that. Or more best, it's my entire life.
Well, we'll get there. We're getting there slowly.
So briefly, just to remind people, okay, we're May 2022 here. So, I mean, once again, you've got this conference happening in Blackpool, but again, you're going to bring it back to Manchester. Just give that a shout out again.
Yeah, absolutely. We have an event taking place now, the Awakening Expo in Blackpool, June the 24th to the 26th, which is going to be on the subjects of ancient mysteries and ufology. And that's at the new convention centre at Winter Gardens, which is a brand new event. And of course, we'll be back in Manchester normally next year in August, where we're going to be doing, the subject is UFOs Evolved. And it's a bit about what we're going to be covering.
That's a bit striking.
Yeah. Because
sorry, I have to say, I'm so impressed with what you've done. And I've also been so depressed by what the UFO community has not done.
Exactly.
And what I really am, I may even have another cup of coffee. Well, Steve, thank you very much. This is a tremendously positive thing, and that's what I try to do on the base thing, is push boundaries and things. And it's a great privilege to see you, and your work is absolutely fantastic. And until next time.
Yeah, thank you, Miles. Thanks for having me on, and we'll keep you up to date as we progress. So
that's fantastic. Well, thank you.
Thanks again, Miles.